Welcome to the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. I'm your host, Jacob Cooper, author of Life After Breath and the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. For those of you who are new to the podcast, please consider supporting the podcast and our channel's algorithm by hitting that subscribe button and sharing your comments in the comments section. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. Let's climb the ladder together. Today's guest is a very sacred and special guest, in my eyes, a historical figure. His name is the one and only James Van Praagh. James is a renowned medium, intuitive, producer, and he's just a New York Times best-selling author, and in my eyes, a unicorn, a guy who's does a lot, and that could be said a lot about old souls. They carry a lot of different gifts and talents, and certainly James is a creative soul and a wonderful medium and intuitive and author and quite a profound message to share with humanity for quite some time. So I look forward to learning more about James in this conversation. I'm sure you will too. And we're going to be delving into, all things James Van Praagh and some of his, personal journeys and his lessons that he has and, the historical path that he's paved for so many of us on ours and as seekers. So without further ado, we bring on the one and only James Van Praagh on the Wisdom of Jacob's Ladder. James Van Praagh, what an honor it is to have you here on my
Thank
podcast. Such a blessing to have you.
thank you, Jake. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've always felt connections to you, but I know we met in person around your birthday time at Helping Parents Heal, in Phoenix, and I saw you presenting and giving like a platform mediumship demonstration, and I was always blown away. But like, wow, you are a gift to the world, and I was just like, I have to interview this guy, you know?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, there was my birthday, which I've forgotten until probably I think last week, and I thought that was my birthday. They presented me with it was a big cake, and,
Yeah.
that Virgo part of me, which people don't realize it, but I'm very shy in many respects. That was
Mm.
very embarrassing in some respects, like, but it was very sweet and very nice. And that was a good
Yeah.
demonstration, I thought. That was a very nice demonstration.
It was one of the highlights certainly of my experience seeing you, and I think the unique part of you is there's like a unicorn element where yes, people, think of you as this medium, sure, but you're also this profound spiritual teacher, and mentor and have so many offerings to just help people wherever they're at. So
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
very
you're a
eclectic.
weirdo. You're a weirdo 'cause, I'll tell you something. Because it was the
I am a
3rd time
weirdo,
I've
but
heard
yeah.
3rd time I've heard unicorn, and on my phone, the actual unicorn.
Oh my god.
So
You
that's
can't make
really
this up.
interesting.
Um,
Validation, my friend.
truths repeat themselves.
Yeah,
Messages are repeated until a lesson is embraced, as they say.
yeah,
So I guess that's something for you
yeah.
to embrace. Well, certainly, to me, in my eyes, you're a historical figure, a luminary, someone who's changed the world. But I know we have a lot in common, both growing up in the tri state area, you as a kind of like a Queens guy, me as
You
a Long
Queens
Island guy.
boy. Yeah,
Queens boy, Bayside boy, not
Bayside.
from Saved by the Bell, not that high school, another high
No,
school. Yeah,
no,
yeah.
very different. And yeah, Throgs Neck Bridge, Whitestone Bridge right over there, and you were just
Yeah.
mentioning we're in that area, and, Fort Totten, which was I grew up in that area. I grew up as a little boy just going those empty but way before you were born, there were empty fields everywhere, and we used to
Wow.
play hide and go seek there, and, yeah, it was fun. Yeah. Great place to grow up as a child, so really
It was
nice.
just very synchronistic. I was right by that bridge, and I was just thinking of you the whole time, every step. I was just carrying James's old energy, but,
Thank
I wanted to visit a little bit of that old energy as a segue. Just, take me through, everyone, knows you now. You've made quite an impact, but I wanna know a little bit about that boy. Take me through that boy growing up in Bayside. I can't imagine, what that must have been like being having all these gifts and, growing up in that different time frame, but take the viewers a little bit with us to that boy.
you. Well, I'm just, as we mentioned me before we got on here that I'm writing my autobiography right now, which I'm in the
Wow.
5th chapter, sorry, chapter 5, and I'm at a point now where actually entered a seminary to be a priest, don't ask why, but I'm up to that point. But,
Wow.
as a child, this is something very fascinating. When I first started the book, it was I find it very, very interesting when you write your life story
Mhm.
and you go back because memories come to the forefront of the brain, of the
Mhm.
mind. And
Yeah.
I was writing about when I was a baby, I'm about 18 months old, And I remember that, I was with the adults in the front room in my house in Bayside, Queens, and they put me in my father put me in the back bedroom where I slept in a crib, laid me down, and I remember I cried my eyes out because I was just wanted to be with them. I didn't wanna be in that dark room, and I remember looking at I see this big thing, and I thought it was a big spider with 2 arms, and it ended up being a clock on the wall, which, like, it was 9:30.
Wow.
And I remember I was crying, 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 and every night, there would be this, pair of blue eyes in a corner of the room,
Mm.
and I would look, and the blue eyes, this man would come over to the bed. He had white hair, and he used to hold a mobile, it's like looked like a wooden mobile, and was fascinating to me, and that would happen quite often. And I remember then when I was probably fast forward to 7 years of age, my grandmother's going through a photograph album, and I said, "Stop, who was that man there?" And
Mm.
she said, "The guy with the white hair and blue eyes." She goes, "Oh, that's your grandfather. He died before you were born." And I said, "He used
Wow.
to visit me when I was a baby, when I was" and I remember that really, really well, and he still comes around. He's still
Mm.
a guide. So I see him a lot. Alex, his name is, I write about him. As a child, I used to see spirit not all the time, it was just a very natural thing. I'd see colors around people. I'd see auras, lights around my friends that I'd play sports with. I'd play stickball and basketball and kickball, and I used to see lights and colors around them. I remember specifically we were playing, I guess what was called a war in those days, right? Where the 2 teams would hide behind trees and bushes. And I remember I saw a bunch of colors around this one person, and then I saw a spirit boy around this friend of mine. And I told him, "Look, there's that kid over there that who you're talking to." I said, "He's right by Frankie's shoulder." I said, "There's no one there." I said, "There is." And
Hmm.
they made fun of me, and that was that was a spirit.
Mm.
And I remember years later, I was in elementary school. I was raised Catholic, which I never related to, but I have a Jewish background on my father's side, and I relate more to that tradition. And it was
Mm.
so interesting. I'm not a morning person, so I tended to daydream and fall asleep at 9 o'clock in the morning in the homeroom. And I remember that I was dozing off, and a boy came through the window, and his came over to me, and his name was William, and he said, "I knew you in the Civil War. Here you go."
Mm.
And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "You don't know what this means now, but later you'll use it. Remember, I knew you. My name is William from the Civil War." And he went out that window. Well, it was this diagram of some sort, and I ended up, going home that afternoon and drawing that on paper
Mm.
and, put it away, and it wasn't until 35 years later, maybe, when I wrote a book called Growing Up in Heaven. And at the end of the book, I wanted to describe, from my understanding, an illustration of what the soul might look like. And that experience came right back to my mind, that picture, that diagram. So it's actually in the back of my book, Growing Up in Heaven. And it's
Mm.
144 pieces, sacred geometry, and
Wow.
that's it. And now fast forward, I had a near-death experience I don't know, 15 years, maybe 20 years now. And I remember that near-death experience I had. I remember the experience where I was, aware that there were, like, I don't know, cords, you could say, into these little squares all around me, and that was the exact same diagram that's also in the book. So that was kind of spooky, ooky, weird. And then I remember my mom, I used to say to my mother, we used to do, prayers every night before we went to bed, kneel down inside of the bed. And I said, "Mommy, who are those people at the end of the bed with the lights around them?" And, "Oh, them? Those are God's angels. You see them?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "I used to see them too when I was a little girl. They'll always protect you. They'll always take care of you. Nothing to be afraid of." I said, "Okay." And that was very beginning. That was 4 or 5 years of age, 6 years of age. And that's really when it happened. And then I was just writing the book about, my first grade experience. And I was always and Jacob, I'm not sure about you, but I bet this has happened to you as well. I was always abused as a kid by my or bullied, I guess you would say, by
Mm.
people who beat me up in school or whatever, and it happened a lot, even in seminary. And what happened? And I think on some level, my energy was so big or expansive that on some level they felt intimidated. So they kind of
Mm.
probably happened to you because remember you're short in stature, right?
Mm.
Well, a healer once told me from a healer from Japan once said to me, when I was older, he said, and he didn't know anything about me, who I was, and we had this session. He goes, "Huh, you're a healer." I said, "Well, yes." He goes, "The reason why you came back short in stature this lifetime was because you have so much energy, you would intimidate people. They wouldn't have received the message. So you had to come back shorter in stature.
Oh,
And that
interesting.
makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. And same with you, but you're about the same height. I think that's true. I think that that rings truth to me. You know? So that
Wow.
was mm,
That's because there's, like, a big stigma, especially as athletes, that you have associated, with hype. So that's a nice spiritual reframe of seeing, like, wow, I'm not a small person, I have a big energy, but it allows people to, take you in a little bit easier. It would be too much if, like,
exactly. They can digest it. That's exactly
it's
right.
more palatable or something like that.
Yeah, and
Wow.
this is interesting. You might find this is Jacob, and forgive me because I don't get out much. So you're my first person I've seen in a couple of days. So I'll be speaking to you.
I'm an illusion of your mind. I'm just,
Good. It's like writing my book. Here we go. But I was writing this last chapter, and I thought it was so fascinating because I was talking about, and I didn't mean to put down the Catholic Church, but I did in some ways
Mhm,
because I had a nun who beat me once, not a lot, but she
mm,
did, and I remember that trauma because that was a trauma. Now, of course, you couldn't do that, but I remember the thing, and I wrote in this chapter about how one of the things that's so confusing was the hypocrisy that and this is so funny 'cause growing up in that Catholic thing, I
mhm,
asked my friend Jeffrey in 1st grade, "Who are these ladies with these black things on them?" He goes,
mm,
"Well, they're their bridal dresses because 'cause they're all married to Jesus." And I said, "Huh? How could they all be married? I thought a husband and wife are just a couple. Why there how could there be all these wives and they're dressed in black,
mm,
and it's to some white man who you don't see?" Well, and
mm,
so I totally didn't understand that. And then when you think it's true, and the next
uh-huh,
part of it was, you know, why would this what was it? Oh, the colors. I would see colors. I'd see a lot of auras. In 2nd grade, I saw a lot of auras, and I'd see the colors. I'd see I called them color. My mother said, "Oh, those are," I said, "I see rainbows around people." And she said, "Oh,
mm,
those was called the aura." I used to see them too, and people when they're kind-hearted and nice and loving, they'll be bright colors. But when they're dark, when they're mean people or not kind-hearted, they'll be darker. And I remember when I was hit by the nun for some very bad reason, stupid reason, an
mm,
color pencil or something. I remember I blacked out on the floor
yeah,
and I opened my eyes and all these beautiful colors, and then I look over and there's this dark brown and red, and it was right on the nun. It was right on her.
mhm,
And that was interesting to me as far as what colors were about and how what we think and what we say and what we do is replicated in the auric fields around us. And that to this day, I wish people would know that what you think is a reality there. And
mhm,
because we're all magnets, you attract to you those of that energy field, those of that same vibration, right? So if you
mm.
think good things, you'll have good people around you. Bad things, you'll have bad things around you. So I have a hard time being with people who don't think good thoughts. I just
Ah, yeah. It's a you would say it's like a social litmus or currency or like a magneticism of the people that we draw in,
yeah,
to our field. Yeah, that was a big lesson for my NDE was just the value of thoughts and how, sometimes we just, like, brush them away like they're nothing, but I'm glad that you're highlighting these from your own, like,
they're everything.
experience as
They're
a young.
everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, James, because I don't know about you, but a lot of kids are prescribed, a desirability to be normal or to fit in.
What's normal?
That's and
What's
exactly.
normal?
And I'm wondering for you, like, obviously you mentioned your mother
Yeah.
seemed to have some degree of understanding, but what was it like for you having all these experiences and degrees of awareness and then looking over your shoulder and then was there a moment you're like, "Oh crap, like I'm kind of alone in this. People aren't understanding," or did you keep this very close to your chest and didn't really tell too many people?
Well, that's a great question, and it really coincides with what I've been, thinking, writing my book, and it's been stirring in my mind. So thank you for asking that because it does bring up that sense that what was it like? And I just got to go back to Jacob. I don't mean to sound weird about it, but I'm going to. 'Cause I'm not normal. So, the thing which is I do know, and I believe that, of course, we set up our lifetime before we come back into this, on the earth,
Mhm,
into this school, soul school of the earth, that we do sit with our guides and teachers, and we really look at, the people that we are going to share this time with, the lessons that we're here to learn because they were here just to learn lessons to grow. And some of those lessons might be self-love,
Mhm.
kindness, compassion, forgiveness. And those parents and siblings and people in the inner circle are your greatest teachers because
Mhm.
they do reflect what's in you, that mirror.
Mhm.
And so I think I chose this family because number one, my father was a theatrical person. He was in the theater. My grandfather,
Mm.
Alec, was, my brother was, my father was. I was in the theater for a little bit working on backstage. And also I have a singing voice, a Broadway voice type of thing.
Wow.
And yeah, I came in with a lot of different abilities. It's really weird. I'm an artist as well. It's so strange. But
Would you say,
so,
like,
but
jack of all trades,
jack of all
master of a
trades.
few, kinda that's an old soul kinda thing,
Well,
which, you
the
know,
first psychic I
yeah.
went to when I was 18 years old, she looked at me and she said, I don't even know what a psychic was. She goes, "Hmm, very interesting with you." I said, "Why?" She said,
Mm.
"You're a soul that come back with a lot of different there's no schools. If you no school for you, because you can do that, you do that, you can do that, you do that. I won awards for design. I do landscaping design. I do paint. I sing very well. I can
Oh
write
my
books. I
god.
do work." So it's just something I came back with those abilities, if you will. But I
See,
think that
that's the unicorn I was referring to
that's the
early
universe,
on.
that's
That's
right.
it.
That's right, you're right, you're right. But
Yeah.
I think that we come back with those beings, those parents, if you will, that will be the best for us to our potential growth. So
Mhm.
I obviously chose, my mom, that environment, that atmosphere,
Mhm.
to have someone who would have an understanding of the type of work,
Mhm.
and yet has a very strong, a religious background, which is very
Mhm.
interesting because I really just recently go through the whole religious Catholicism type thing, and looking at that and the 8 years I spent in that parochial school, I ended that chapter by saying, "I love the ritualistic part of it. I love the playing singing the music. I love the
Mhm.
costumes, I love the
Mhm.
altar boy part of putting on the costumes. The ritual stuff, I didn't understand any of it. I didn't
Mhm.
like it. It didn't feel right to me,
Mhm.
but I like the ritualistic part. And, it taught me it really did teach me, I gotta say, the one thing I got out of Catholicism was it did instill in me the golden rule. Treat others as you wanna be treated. That it did do, and I've lived by that, and that's gotten me through my life, and it's the greatest rule there is, the golden rule. And I think also that, um not from the Catholic Church, but my own work that I've learned. And this is not that, far back. This is probably the past 15 years, 10 years. The learning about because we learn every day, even as mediums, we learn every single day. And
Mhm.
every reading we do, we should learn. And every medium should try to go higher and higher and be the best thing and be even more and more and more. And I have learned probably in the past 10, 15 years that judgment, boy, that's a prison. Why would we
Mhm.
judge another person? Judgment is fear based. And I think life is a simple, I think life can be very simple, but I think humans get caught up in the complexity of the simplicity that they really, life is a series of choices from when we're born to what school we go to what classes, what who we marry if we do or partner
Right.
with, and where we're gonna live, whatever it might be. And I
Mhm.
think that we can choose either love or fear. And fear
Mhm.
might be when we're young, I want my parents to approve. I want society to approve. I'll go into this career because 'cause I'll make money. The Jewish background that you and I share with be the
Yeah.
doctor, be the lawyer, come on, make the money. And I know that one too. And that was where I have to say, so judgment to me is fear-based because when we judge another, we wanna feel better then. So we put that other
Mhm.
person down when we feel more in control, if you will.
Mhm.
I think that has
Mhm.
a lot to do with it. And, yeah, I think one thing that's mentioned to you also as you're talking about it, one of the things I realized, and I don't mean to sound weird about it, but maybe that unicornian thing. I think I came in with a sense of myself. I think I had a really strong sense of me as a person, as I was a good person. I was a really good person. And I remember when I sit in the front yard of my Bayside Queens house, and I grew up in a very tough, abusive household
Mhm.
with alcoholism and violence.
Yeah.
And I used to think, you know, this isn't me. This isn't where I belong. This is only like I felt like it was a temporary thing. And
Mhm.
I then, which is very funny, I really kind of enjoyed the moments, and I tried to find excitement in taking the ivy off the front of the house, raking up the leaves, sweeping the sidewalk, doing a newspaper route, playing stoop ball.
Mhm.
I found enjoyment in those things, everything. So I've always kind of been like I've always that sense of myself as far as that background. And then, of course, you meet people along the way. I had the kind of
Mhm.
adopted mom at age 10 who really instilled in me a sense of myself and that I'm a good person. And the funny thing is, I wrote this in the book just now, and it was she taught me how to swim when I was 10 years old, and I was always
Wow.
afraid of water. And
Interesting.
a couple of things she taught me was, she said, "James, you need to surrender. You need to surrender all things."
Surrender. Ah,
And then
that's a
she
big
taught
one.
a big one, and then she taught me about breath. She said, "You need to breathe this way." And there was that, and then there was in a sense of awareness of being where I am. Those 3 things: breath, surrender, awareness, and I still use them today, of course.
Wow.
You know, it's very interesting in your life, you meet so that was really the beginning. I never th anything was weird about these things. As most kids, you know, you
Mm,
measure your environment by your experiences that you have, right?
mhm,
That's how you measure things, and I've always been one to do it that way. I never did it by what other people thought, my friends thought, what they thought. I did it by what I felt was right with what felt right to me, like, my friend's mother had a garden, and she used to create
mm.
make a vegetable garden or a flower garden, and I used to be there planting geraniums and carrots with her, and
Wow.
that brought me joy, that was fun, and I
Mm,
love that, and then sometimes I'd see the sprites and the divas and that whole little kingdom,
mm,
these little beings, and I don't know, it was always very natural in me. I was never
mhm.
afraid, and to this day, I can tell you I've been more afraid of the living than I am of the dead. It's really true.
Yeah, yeah, everything that you've been through, it's understandable, but, I'm wondering if that gardening analogy, is that symbolic or allegorical for the life that you live where you see potential, you see intelligence, you
100%.
see it in front of you, and it drives you nuts in a way when it's not actualized? Is that kind of a big part of you? Like, almost sometimes I think our life is governed by symbols, and we're seeing all these architects and patterns of our lives, and it speaks to a greater, broader theme of yourself. Would you say that's a
I
big
think
part?
you're very insightful, so, you know, you should be a therapist. Um,
I am.
are you a therapist?
I am.
Is that the work you do as a therapist?
3 decades. I work in the mental health field full
But do
time.
you do intuitive
So,
therapy?
I don't
I mean, it is
identify.
intuitive anyway, but maybe you
I
should just
I I don't
focus.
identify it as such,
Oh, I would.
but
That's who you are,
um,
brother.
no, it's like I'm kind of like you. I'm a free bird. I do my own thing. They teach us like all these things to do in college,
Yeah,
and that's a basis. But my style is more, just unique myself. I think
yeah,
when
you get
people
to the core of the matter, which is really a great therapist will get
we
to the
try
core
to
of the matter. I mean, that's really get or can we say, get to the heart of the matter? And
we really
the
yeah.
soul is tucked neatly behind the heart, so it's that's great. I think
Heart
you should
is
have in your description intuitive,
yeah.
yeah, because our
We'll try.
society is changing, and more people are open to that, and there are more therapists that do intuitive work and mediumistic work every day. They mix the because it's very similar, as you know, mixing those 2 worlds. Um,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
anyway, where were we? I'm sorry, I forgot to
I know, I know. Well, it was interesting what you were mentioning is,
Oh,
so
the
yeah,
garden
with the
analogy.
garden, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree with
John
you. I've
Denver,
always been into the
yeah.
garden. I'm a Capricorn rising Virgo. I mean, it has to be garden. I've
Mhm,
always been very earthy. I've always been very down to earth, very, as you know, you met me, very real. I'm just that's the way I am. I'm a New
mhm.
Yorker. I just am a New Yorker. I see things at face value. But then I see it for what it is.
Mm,
And that also helps with, of course, as a child, seeing auras and colors and
mhm,
knowing people from the inside out. That's always been
mhm.
an advantage, okay?
Yeah.
So, one of the things I wrote about in the book, which I wanted to mention too, which is really interesting, the hypocrisy was that words that come out of adults, I think most kids are like this. I think young children, they
Mhm,
learn not to trust adults. For one of the
mm,
reasons is I think kids are very clairvoyantly open, seeing colors and spirit, but they see these colors coming well, they see the aura, right? They see auras, they know people's energy, and then they see the words come out of the adult's mouth, and the words don't match the energy of the person. So the kid
mm.
might think
There's an incongruency.
there's an
Yeah.
incongruency, and I think that
There's a dichotomy.
the dichotomy,
Yeah.
exactly right. So as
Which
far as gardening goes, I find gardening very relaxing. I always found it the serenity. I've always and like you mentioned, well, I said you're very psychic, the potential of a place,
mm,
of a garden, of a
mhm,
house, of an apartment. Every apartment I've had, I've always been a beautiful, like, little garden in a balcony, wherever it was. The house I'm living now in San Diego, I created 8 different gardens here. because it was called for, nature called for it, and I
Mm.
felt it, and I let nature tell me what it was that was needed in that space, and working with those kingdoms and, the divas, and if you will, and all the different kingdoms and the work with the environment and the garden and the land and, the flowers, the trees. I went to
Mhm.
every single nursery probably within 20 miles from San Diego.
Wow.
At one point, an accountant said, "You can't spend any more money on plants because it's more than a house right now, you can't
Yeah,
do it."
yeah. Wow.
But I get you get so much out of it, and it's a walking meditation, and
Mhm,
I just feel the life of these flowers and the colors, and I have a sense of gratitude. Every time I take a
mm,
step, I have gratitude with what
mhm.
what they give back, right?
Yeah.
I'm not any better than they are. We it's a sharing
Symbiotic dynamic where
it's
a give and
symbiotic.
take, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering too, like, with because a lot of people try to intellectualize God. Is gardening a way for you to almost embody God or understand, like, the creative ability to create life and see it unfold and step back into it and nurture it? Is that also, like, even a higher level? I don't know, maybe I'm thinking a little bit too esoteric or out there, but I don't
I
know.
I I think you gotta stop while you're ahead, Jacob. You think too I
Yeah.
think that you just said it. I think God is that creativity. I think God is that creative force in every living thing. I think
Mhm,
God is that breath, if you want to breath. It's that
mhm,
force within every living thing. And that therefore we could say that everything is made of that same breath, made of that same force.
mhm,
Every animal, every insect, every leaf, every flower, every petal, everything is that life force. And to me, God is that creative force, if you will, that
yeah.
creative force that will create anything we as humans are given the privilege to use and manifest the way we choose. Now it has to work within the laws of the universe, please. But
Mhm,
once we understand the laws of the universe and work in symbiotic ways with the universe, wow, there's universal ordering. We can have what we want. I
mhm,
have a course right now on my school, and it's a spiritual life coaching course. And one of the things that's one of the bonus items that Spirit just gave me to put in there was about universal manifesting. And it's great. It's all about using our thoughts to manifest what we want, the lives that we want, and breaking old patterns, letting things go, and living that true life of who we are as an authentic, genuine being, because every soul is uniquely different. We're
mhm,
all different, like snowflakes.
mhm.
Everyone is different, but together we make a beautiful tapestry. Yeah.
I love it. The
Yeah.
the the garden of the thoughts or the seeds of our mind, right? With manifestation.
Listen
Yeah.
to you.
It's
Listen
it's
to
it's
you.
this is
Listen.
very
It
John
just
this is
pours out of your
very,
mouth, Jacob. Pours out.
this is very John Denver, if you're
Shut
familiar with that's inch by inch, row by row, someone make James Van Prague's garden grow. Oh, wait,
up.
it's all we don't need more growing, we're good, yeah. But,
There's a great movie which you've probably never seen because 'cause you're young, but I it's my favorite number 1 movie, and I
you
watch
never know. I have a pretty big bandwidth of,
oh, then you'll
movies, yeah.
probably know it then,
Maybe,
and
maybe.
it's my number 1 movie because of the philosophy behind it, and the
Mm.
music is by Cat Stevens. So,
Oh,
it's Harold and Maude with Ruth Gordon.
I'm gonna have to write this down. If this is J
Oh, you
this
need to see Harold and Maude, and
'cause
it's
this
Ruth
is
Gordon,
yeah.
who's a lovely British actress, and she's 79 years old, and she falls in love with an 18-year-old, right? And
Mm,
they fall in love with each other, and he kinda more falls for her than him, but it's a lovely let's say relationship, yeah?
mhm,
And it's just about life, and it's about, she kind of falls for him. He's obsessed with suicide, which is very interesting,
mhm,
and it's really kinda obsessed about death. And really what this lady does, and I've seen it maybe 6 times, and the 6th time I watch it, I got something very different out of it. And it's a really well done, philosophical, kind of down to earth, very popular in the late '60s, early '70s, and that's what made Cat Stevens, a musician. Yosef is wonderful, and it's all about, she said one of the scenes, if you don't mind me just, telling you about
yeah,
she's in the city of San Francisco, her and Harold, and they're driving a car. She steals all the different cars that she goes about. She's able to get in these cars. And, she goes, "Oh my gosh, we gotta save that tree. Look at it, I can't even breathe. The smog, I can't breathe." And she takes this city tree and she puts it in the back of this other car. She takes it, but there's a trailer, and they're driving along, and a policeman stops her, a motorcycle cop stops. He goes, "Ma'am, you can't use that. That's it. That tree." She goes, "Oh, it needs some life. You gotta give it
mhm.
life." "But ma'am, that's not your tree." She goes, "It's everybody's tree," and so forth, so on. And
Wow.
then she said, "Is this gonna take long?" And he goes He goes, "Ma'am, would you be quiet?" She goes, "Okay, just 5 minutes," and she gets up and she goes and she gets Harold, just, "Come on, you bring the shovel," and they have the tree,
Mm,
and they steal the motorcycle and drive on. But what it's about is life, and she said to him, one it's so great. They're sitting in a field of daisies. He goes, "This is so
mm,
beautiful." He goes, "Don't you love this?" And she goes, "This is nice, but" and she throws up the dishes, "But this is all nice, all of these.
mm,
Everything is
wow,
different. It's
mhm,
unique. One petal's off here." And she goes, "It's all about life, L-I-F-E, life." And
mhm,
it's such a great movie. I'm not gonna
mhm,
ruin the end, but she teaches him how to live life when he's obsessed about death, and it's about
wow.
fear and love, and, anyway, people should watch Harold and Maude. It was
I
a real strong one for my influence too growing up.
and that, and I thank you so much for sharing that with myself and my audience, being
Yeah,
from someone who is very philosophical, but also, worked in the film industry and really knows quality. And
I did.
you have a good eye for quality, and
Thank
you
you.
know what works, what doesn't. So I'm gonna take that with high
Thank
regard.
you.
You
Yeah,
know,
people will love it, and it's a Bible movie for me. It's a biblical, it's just a real wow, that's a good word.
it's
Just like
real.
Helen Keller, The Miracle Worker with Helen Keller,
Mhm.
another classic movie, which
Well,
is
well,
wonderful.
yeah, and I was listening to Matt Damon, and he was getting interviewed, and he asked, "Why aren't movies softer and have, like, a better message to them? Why are they, like, so, like, coming at you?" And he basically said since the removal of DVDs and VHSs, they have to go on the algorithms of what they know is gonna bank in the theaters. They've gone away less from more of movies with soft messages and stuff like that, and I don't know, it's interesting.
You
Yeah.
know, you're right on, you're so right, you're so in tune, you're so in tune. When I was a young boy, I'll go back to when I was a young boy, and I was probably well, yeah, I was younger, my early 30s to late 20s. I wrote a Broadway show, and I wrote this show I wrote all the music, and the music
Mhm,
or they wrote it through me,
mhm,
and I had all the music, and it was about the story of Edgar Allan Poe, and it was life of Edgar
wow,
Allan Poe, and it was the beginning, middle, and the end, and his life was always about death, he's obsessed with death, so it worked
mhm,
perfectly. And, I remember that, it was really an interesting thing because, when I went to sell it and I went to the big producers trying to selling it, and this is true of TV, by the way, too, I've sold TV
mhm,
shows and attempted
yeah,
but they said at the moment of the Broadway show thing, they said, "Wow, this is great music. Who did the music? Was it Liszt or was it Beethoven?" I said,
mm,
"No, this is it." I said, "It could have been, but I brought it through, and it
uh,
was it was wonderfully done." And unfortunately, they didn't do it, and the reason they didn't do it was because the producers of Broadway shows and film,
mhm,
now TV, they wanna make sure it's gonna be a success. So they'll always do things that have already succeeded
mhm,
and
mhm,
do remakes because they're assured. So they're
yeah,
living in fear. So
mhm,
their creative energy is kind of gone,
yeah,
and that's really sad. So I one of my things I'd like to do when I retire is create a small theater company and just do little theater works and do
wow,
creative things because there's so much of the human condition that can be
mhm,
expressed through music and theater and
mhm,
dance that, you know, that we should do it, you know?
yeah.
That's all this when I
It's,
sold the TV show The
yeah,
Ghost Whisperer, I showed the CBS, very similar, but the thing about The Ghost Whisperer that was very successful was it was unique in that here I was as a medium, and no one else was out there as a medium with my personality and out there trying to sell a show about that, and I already had experience with Ted Danson playing me in a movie, a
mhm.
miniseries movie that was the highest rated CBS movie there was, and except for Jesus, which was one more, which so
Yeah,
so, the and it was such a success, said, "Can we do a series about this?" And I said, "Well, yeah," and I brought in a friend of mine at the time that who dealt with a lot with earthbound spirits,
mhm,
whatever that is, earthbound spirits. I understood a little bit of that, and I said, "Well, let's do this," and I did a reading I did an evening of, messages for the executives of CBS and ABC at a producer's house in
wow,
Sherman Oaks in the Valley. It was so funny. It's so typical. One of the executives and a development executive comes in from ABC, and he
mhm.
comes over and he goes, "Is this gonna take long? I got scripts I have to read."
Oh god, Aish.
And his grandmother came through and
Mm.
changed his life. Changed his life.
Oh, wow.
That sold the
Mm,
show. Yeah.
yeah,
But, they want stuff that's gonna suc they don't wanna again, people living in fear or love. That there we go. So,
yeah,
it
it's
goes across the
sad.
board.
Yeah,
It's sad. It is sad.
because, yeah, the way the world is, we need a lot of wisdom. We need a lot of lessons. We need good messaging. I think information governs behaviors, govern decisions. We're getting all this pollution, then the behaviors kind of follow in accordance. So,
We need
yeah.
to get higher. We need to raise the bar a bit, don't you think? That people can
Oh,
actually think of things.
we could do better. I'm wondering for you, Sigmund Freud talked about what you're describing as kind of like a third person ego, your ability to take yourself out of yourself and as an observer. And this keen to gift, a self-awareness that you were born with.
Yeah.
Was there a point in time where you just said, "Why me? Why
Yeah.
was I born this way?"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
do you have like understandings as to why you came into this life with these
Yeah.
great degree of
Yeah.
wisdom and tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
that.
I
Yeah.
didn't have that until later on in life, of course, different
Took
life
some time.
experiences. But for people that don't know my background, which is kind of an interesting background, which I haven't been written yet in a book, but well, because it's later on, I really was, as I said earlier, I was going to go into musical theater because I have a legit voice, took voice lessons, and I was auditioning when I was 19 years old. I'd audition at the cattle calls in Manhattan and
Mhm,
get there in the morning, get my 8 by 10, and then say come back at 4. So I'd go around Manhattan and learn about Manhattan and look up the skyscrapers and say,
mhm.
"One day I might get a job in one of those," or whatever it was, and
Wow.
it was just my imagination run.
Mm,
I now the psychic thing turned off probably around I would think around 12, 13. When puberty started, then the psychic thing kinda dropped aside because I had other
mm,
stuff probably. But for some reason it stopped, and I went into the theater one and then I thought, I was able then I went to study broadcasting because I
mm.
thought I wanna be a writer, a sitcom writer because 'cause I'm funny. I thought I'd do sitcom writing. At the time, I finished 2 years in New York, and then my father was a stagehand, and I was able to get a job on the original show Grease with, Richard Gere and Barry Bostwick and
Wow.
Pedro
Mm,
Rabot and all those people, and I was doing the rails on that, and that's when I was still doing voice lessons, and the money I got there, I paid for my college,
mm.
and I used to watch the show Grease I watched it at least 1,000 times on stage.
Wow.
All the other
Mm,
stagehands were downstairs playing poker. I was pulling the ropes,
mm,
and occasionally I'd be running bookies to the bookies across the street, which I didn't realize I was doing for the actors, but
mm,
that's another story. But I got to that point where I thought, "You know what? I could do this on stage. I don't wanna be backstage. I'm gonna go so I'm not gonna have I could have a great life as a stagehand, but I meant for other things." So that's when
mm,
I decided to finish my broadcasting degree, and I ended up going to San Francisco State because they after a year of residency, they give you free tuition, and I was paying for it.
mm,
I went to San Francisco State, I got a broadcasting degree, and it was during that time that I met, David Onspa, who was a producer of Hill Street Blues, which is a big show then.
mm,
And, I would drive him to this we had a broadcasting conference in the
mm,
senior year of school, and as I'm driving to the campus, I said, "Listen, I'm graduating, in June. Do you have any openings for any, like, production assistants?" He goes,
mm,
"Yes, on Hill Street Blues. Be there July 7th, and I'll get you a job." I said, "Really?" So I thought that was my great break, and so I went back to New York and got all my things together, and, my mother had a stroke and ended up in Long Island Jewish Hospital,
mm.
couldn't speak or she had
Wow.
aphasia very badly, and I knew I had to get out to California.
Mhm,
So I had a big life decision. Wow, what do I do? Do I stay with my mom or do I go
mm,
follow my dream? And I used my intuition, and I knew that she wanted me to follow my dream. So I drove cross country in 5 days or 3 days, I made it very fast to make
wow.
sure I got there in time. And I got to the studio, MTM Studios on Radford Avenue over there in Studio City, and in those days, there were no cell phones, of course, and I went to the receptionist, I told her, "Use my name, phone number. Could you at least have this man, call me?"
Mm,
Because it was Anthony Yerkovich, and Anthony Yerkovich was a producer, and I said, "He promised me a job." She goes, "Well, we don't hire people that way." I said, "Well, he promised me a job." She goes,
mm,
"Okay." Just like thinking, I was innocent, probably everyone. Anyway, to make a long story short, he never called me, ever called me.
mm,
I ended up looking for any job I could, to the point I was almost selling my blood. And I ended up giving
mm,
resumes to production
mm,
companies, and I finally got a job as a runner, delivering scripts and legal documents,
mm,
contracts to law firms around Century City, across the Laurel Canyon, and I literally drove back and forth. To make a long story short, I had at least 30 different temporary jobs, from
mm,
law firms to, oh my gosh, to factories, to all different types of and I ended up and I never lost hope. I thought one day I'm gonna write. I need to I need to stay here because I know I just knew inside my being that I was gonna be well known on TV as far as writing. I thought writing and TV, writing and TV. That's all I knew.
Mm.
And I was working at the William Morris Agency, which is a theatrical agency at the time, big agency. And I was got a temporary job pulling staples out of contracts in the basement below the mailroom.
Phew.
And I was pouring them for what they call microfiche, which they don't
Mm.
have anymore. And I would stay there 8 hours a day, and I'd be seeing Groucho Marx or Frank Sinatra's contracts with the ball, and all the people I've since brought through us from
Mhm.
Spirit. Anyway, so it was at that time that a lady said to me, my supervisor, Carol Shoemaker, she said, "Do you wanna go see a medium?" And I said, "What is a medium?" He's someone who talks to dead people." And I said,
Yeah.
"I don't believe in that."
Mm.
But I thought, "I'll humor this lady." So I went with her, and as soon as I walked into Brian Hurst's, apartment in Manhattan Beach, he looked at me and he said, "You're a medium."
Wow.
And being the smartest cynical New Yorker, I said, "Oh, great. California's land of fruit and nuts, and I found one right here." He said,
Yeah.
"2 years' time, the spirit people are gonna use you." I said, "Huh?" He said,
Mm.
"You're a medium, and in 2 years' time, you're gonna start talking to spirit, and you're gonna help change the consciousness of the planet." And I said, "This guy's crazy."
Mm.
What happened was he brought through some details about family members that had passed, and I was very fascinated. So I went to a place called the Bodhi Tree Bookstore on
I
Melrose
know
Avenue,
that very well. Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah.
said every weekend, if you remember, you could sit and read anything you want in any section.
Yeah.
I must have read every section, a book from every section, every for months. I started meditating just to visualize my future as a writer.
Yeah.
And then at the time, I was working on Paramount Studios as a contract coordinator, so I
Mm.
moved up. So it was one day, it was on a Thursday, 12:30 in the afternoon. So you remember these things? And it was after
Amazing.
right, and
Insane. Yeah.
insane. And I walked into my cubicle, and my friend, her name was Jo Dallas, and she walked in the cubicle next to mine. And I looked over, and I saw her dead grandmother next to her. I
Mm.
hadn't had a vision like that since I was a kid. And this woman looked right at me, just like The
Mm.
Sixth Sense. And
Yeah.
she telepathically said to me, "Listen, I'm her grandmother. I lived in Idaho. I had a white house with yellow shutters. We did a footstool cover together. Tell her I'm here." And I looked over at Jo and said, "Would you mind if I ask you a question?"
Mm.
And I told her everything. She said, "Oh, that's my grandmama. She told me she'd come through." I said,
Mm.
well, she's here." And I freaked out because I didn't know. I thought I was
Yeah.
going crazy. How could I
Uh,
live a regular normal life? So I
mm.
literally ran out of the studio, went back to my
Uh,
apartment,
mm.
and walking across the apartment and what to do with my life. I thought people would lock me up. This is
Mm.
back in the early
Yeah.
'90s. I was like crazy. What was happening? So
Mm.
the only number I had was that medium, Brian Hurst. And I called him up. I said, "Brian, I'm freaking out. I saw this dead woman and she's saying these things." And he said, "James, don't you remember the prediction the spirit world made for you that in 2 years' time, you're gonna be working with them?" I said,
Uh,
"Yes, yeah, I remember that." He said, "James, that was 2 years ago today,
oh my lord. Whoa.
to the
Whoa.
day." And I haven't
Uh,
since, and they've always they I sat with Brian then. I sat with him. He took care of me as far as my learning development of a medium, mechanics of mediumship, and got in tune with my guides. And they said,
mm.
"If you work with us, we'll always take care of you. You will never be in need. But if you work with us," and I've done that. I've held my part of the bargain, and they've held their part of the bargain. And
Mm.
that for me at my age, 67, I'm very, very happy. And a life well. That's why my book is called Medium Well Done, because
Medium well done. Oh,
medium
yeah.
well done.
Steak. Yeah.
And
Well,
I did it, we did it, and, obviously, it was a plan that was set up, and I'm just happy, as in any life, I think, again, if you can make the world a better place than when you found it, you've had a successful life, and I
yeah.
think that's what and again, I'm just the vessel of it, I don't see the ego part of it, I'm
Mhm.
just being used to do that work, as we all are,
Mhm.
and, I think it's changed a lot of people's lives, and that's fantastic.
And you've changed the world, and I think there's your story is so beautiful. I hope we can make a movie out of it someday. I don't know if that's in
It
the works
already
or
was.
already was. Already was?
Ted
Okay.
Ted Danson did it. It's
Or
called
may
Talking to Heaven. Yeah,
or may wow. So it
with
already
Queen Latifah, Diane Ladd, Jack
wow.
Palance. Yeah.
And, it's just kinda like that your life is like that song, "Climb Every Mountain," and there's all these challenges, but you never lost sight of your North Star and this dream, and it took you into different places that you didn't envision. And there's this beautiful quote that reminds me of the work that you do, this Picasso quote, like the meaning of life is to find that gift, and that purpose of it is to give it away. And I'm wondering, I mean, at least for me, I see it as a gift, but A, is that something that you see? And also, what do you personally get by, giving these messages? And as a teacher, do you get, something from seeing a shift in front of you with clients and groups that you work with?
I you as a therapist, you'll understand and appreciate this, I'm sure, that I'm number 1, I don't see it as a gift, and it's really, like,
Mhm.
very, very interesting because, like, "Well, you have a gift." Like, I don't have a gift. I'm It's an aspect of my soul.
Mm,
I think we all have intuition. I think everybody is born with the ability to be mediumistic, but it's like I often say, everybody's born with the ability to play the piano,
mhm,
but not everybody is a concert pianist.
yeah,
So I do believe that, and I don't until I pass over, but I do believe in between lives, I worked hard at developing my sensitivity, my
mhm,
intuition, those mediumistic abilities, whatever
mm,
way that is, when I was over there to prepare myself for this mission this time around. Is a
yeah,
mission. And I'm not better than anybody else. I've just studied more, and I think that's just the way it is. The more I do the work, the more humbling you realize the work is, 'cause it's
mhm,
such humbling work because,
mhm,
my God, I mean, it's very humbling when you realize you have people's lives in your hands.
yeah, yeah,
And one of the things which I really I was living in LA when my apartment in LA, and one lady said to me after reading, she said, "Wow, I've been through 10 years of therapy, and one session with you is like 10 years of therapy."
mm,
It's just like you, Jacob, get right to the heart of the matter. You go to the inside and you get rid of all that stuff and you get to
mhm,
where it matters most. And
mhm,
that's very important, I think. I
yeah,
really, you got to make your life matter. I think, you say the North Star. I think what it comes down to, Jacob, was what I said earlier was I knew who I was when I came in. I think I had a sense of something inside me. I don't know what it was.
mhm,
Maybe it was that North Star that sense, and when I was in LA trying to find work, and I just knew there was something within me that led me there. Did I believe in God? Not
mhm,
necessarily. Did I believe in Catholicism? Not necessarily. I believed in my own creative energy. I knew that I was meant to succeed, and that sounds
mhm,
weird. But when I was 3 years old, my mother used to walk me up to nursery school, which was up in O'Connor Park in
mhm,
Bayside, and we walked up the hill once, and I remember there was a man named Vinny, who was a neighbor, coming down the other side, and my mother said, "Hi, Vinny, where have you been?" He goes, "Oh, I was out in California."
hmm,
And I remember saying to my mother at that moment, I looked up and I said, "I'm gonna live in California one day."
wow,
I had no idea what California was. I was 3 years
mhm.
old. Right?
Wow, you
I
just had
never
this
came back with that, "Oh, to do this
formative.
work," obviously.
Yeah. My last question for you is, we've regurgitated a lot of barbaric patterns, and kids have inherited a lot of ideologies, and, to a degree, but there's an evolution. Is there something from your upbringing that you feel parents maybe could lean into more? Or do you feel it was supposed to go out this way, with degree of contrast or things off platform, not always perfect, but is there something maybe that parents could do differently to,
Wow.
allow their children to blossom a little bit better and not bog them
Yeah,
down? Yeah, I don't
yeah.
know if that's something you've thought about, but just
Wow. I
curious
mean,
from your
you
personal
you
experience.
know better than I do because you're more a therapist than
Mhm.
I am, but I think a whole podcast could just be done on parenting. So
Just on that,
a whole other animal
because I
that
think
I take.
if you catch it early, it's easier to pivot, right? Later in life, it may be
Look
sometimes
at
harder, but
my life experience so far has taught me a lot, especially where I'm living here in San Diego. I find a lot of entitlement. I find a lot of parents that don't know how to
Mhm,
parent. I
mhm,
find that there are people that are parents that they don't know what they're doing. They just have kids, and
mhm,
it's like, no, it's a responsibility.
yeah,
And oh, I'll just give them an electric bike, and they can do what they want to do, or I can just give them money, and they'll be fine. And that's not parenting. That's not parenting. I think that you need to really nurture that child.
mm,
I think they need to nurture the intuitive part, that knowingness part, and I think don't talk down to them. Don't be friends necessarily, but honor them, honor their feelings, honor their
mhm,
thoughts. Don't dismiss them,
yeah,
honor them. And love is the greatest teacher. Love them, explain to them, take the time to explain to them why it's important to love another person, why it's important not to judge, why
mhm,
it's important to help people. That's really what it's about, helping another. How can they help somebody? How can they love somebody more? How can they tell good things to somebody? I think those are the things that matter most. in the
Yeah.
very beginning, it's really, I think by the age of 3, a child's brain is already made up. So I think
Mm,
those first years are really important. And remember, pick young children, pick up energy right away because they've just come from that world. So they're very much, if you will, really intensely aware of the energetic nature, atmosphere around people and the words the adults say. So
yeah.
they got to be responsible. And there's a lot to parenting. It isn't easy, and it's not
Yeah.
for everybody.
Mhm.
But make the world a better place. Start with yourself. You know, I really do. I mean, I have a very soft place for children
Yeah.
because I see a lot of abuse. I see a lot of that sort of thing,
Mm,
and I just can't handle it. And it's I always wanted kids that made a great
mhm.
dad, and I was told by that same psychic. She said, "Oh, you
Wow.
want children this lifetime?" I said, "Yeah, like 2 boys." She goes, "You're not gonna have children." I said, "Huh?"
Uh,
And she said, "The world will be your children." And I'm like, "What
mm.
does that mean?" She goes, "Oh, later on, you'll understand what it means." Of course, now
I
I
understand. Yeah, because I know when you're speaking at Helping Parents Heal, you mentioned all the kids were, like, bouncing balls around your place and hanging out, and it's like your home is like a playground for kids, so it's it's like, all right, 1 or 2 kids, there's thousands of kids that you have, you're like a Mother Teresa, like, it's just, one after another, and when you're talking, I feel most parents there's a lot of parent behavioral guides, but I think just start by listening to that Whitney Houston song about, like, "I believe that children are our future," all that, like,
isn't
just
it
those
great?
lyrics are that song makes
It's
me cry every
great.
time, but listen to those lyrics and you'll be a better parent.
You're right. It's a great one. You bet. Children are our
Yeah.
future. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But James, I know you're a busy man.
Yeah,
I
I have
want to
another
honor your
interview.
time.
Thank
Is
you,
there
Jacob.
any types of programs? I know you mentioned your book coming up, but anything
Yes,
that
I
you'd
have
like
an
to
online
share with my audience?
I'd
Yeah.
love to, because we get a lot of help from it. I have an online school, which is what I'm really working at teaching, and I work with students. I work out one-on-one. I do Zoom courses, Zoom classes. It's called the JVP School of Mystical Arts.
Mhm.
And that says, courses on healing, on 28-day transformation courses, mediumship, a psychic, all different 42 different
Mhm.
courses that I've created with the spirit world. And right now we have spiritual life coaching course, which is good for everybody. And I
Love
talk
it.
about breaking patterns of behavior, letting go of the old tapes, being
Mhm.
your genuine self. So I think a lot of your audience members would enjoy that school, the online school, the JVP School of Mystical Arts.
And make sure you sign up for his newsletter. I get
Yes.
emails all the time. It's you
Thank you.
you do great work, so
Thank
check
you,
out
too.
his website, give him a follow on social media. We'll
I'm
have
doing
all that
TikTok now.
included.
Woohoo!
And TikTok, I heard about that, so
Yes.
he's
I'm
he's in with
glad.
the times. He's
Follow me, tap, tap.
always been hip and still going, so
Well, today my
James.
friend who's helping me with it said, "You say tap, tap, tap." So I came up with a new expression. Break your glass, break your phone glass, break the glass.
Love it. But
Crazy.
James, you're
Thank you,
welcome
Jacob.
anytime, and let us know when that book is coming out. We'd love
I
to have you and share that
just
with
gotta
the
get a
audience.
publisher. Thank
Yeah,
you, I will.
you'll have Thank
I
you so
will.
much. James
Thank
Van
you, my
Praagh.
friend. Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Well, that was a wonderful interview about James. I really learned a lot about James and took a lot, big of a closer look at James as a person and his childhood and really understanding the decades worthy of work that he's had in his career and his impact in this world and, how he came to really connect to the spirit realm and, the just impact that he's had spanning from, media impacts to, sessions and groups and workshops and all this other stuff, and he's still rocking and rolling and doing his thing. So, thank you for tuning into James's interview. I absolutely loved every word that he shared, and do continue to follow his community that's still going and growing. So, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you here on the next time, the Wisdom Jacob's Ladder. And thank you for ascending and climbing with us here today.